Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Telus Communications is a Canadian telco which grew to $1 billion in annual revenue in the 1990s. President at the time was Roy Osing, who, if you're a regular listener to Be Daily, will know has a no-nonsense, practical approach to business. Chris Ashmore has always wanted to ask Roy, how did he guide the company to billion-dollar success?
Let me say, first of all, that there's no silver bullet to this. There's no one thing that I could look at and say, hey, that was the magic. But there are, I would say, 6 things that I think were more important than others in terms of influence. The first one is differentiation. Look, in a world of sameness, where everybody tries to use words like better and best and number one and market leader to differentiate themselves, and we spent time figuring out what we were the only one doing. Okay, find out what people care about, find out what they crave, and then figure out how you can be the only one that actually provides that. So the work that we did on differentiating ourselves from a sales point of view, from a service point of view, from a solution set point of view, from a communications point of view, that work was extremely important because it laid the foundation for execution that took on other challenges. The second piece, I would say, is we had a plan that was just about right. In other words, we didn't spend a lot of time trying to make it a perfect plan according to, say, the pundits' definition of what a perfect plan was. I coined the phrase, let's head west. And generally, we created a plan around that notion. We got it just about right, put the emphasis on execution, and tried to execute flawlessly a plan that was imperfect. Okay, and that was the modus operandi that I used as a leader. Never to strive for perfection because it doesn't exist anyways. And even if you thought you got it today, it's gone tomorrow. The world is so complicated, and it was 5-6 years ago even, that it will not allow you to be perfect, okay, in whoever's definition you want to look at. I mentioned this. The third thing is tighten up on execution. Loosen up on the plan, tighten up on execution. If you want to be precise on the implementation of a mediocre idea or just about right idea. And so what we ended up doing is spending 80% of our time on figuring out what the execution plan looks like and 20% on getting the plan just about right. Whereas in today's world, it's exactly the opposite. The fourth thing I will mention is what I call line of sight. Line of sight as a concept is basically ensuring that the role of everybody in the organization had a direct line of sight to the strategy. They knew exactly what to do to execute their role in the strategy. Like a lot of people talk about organizational dysfunction. Why are organizations dysfunctional? You got some people doing this and some people doing that. Well, the reason for that is they don't understand their role. And one of the biggest responsibilities of the leader is to make sure that everybody has a direct line of sight to the strategy. Okay, and so what I would do is I would have personally workshops throughout the organization talking about what does it mean to sales? What does it mean to the sales reps? What does it mean to sales managers? What does it mean to the data installers, et cetera, so that everybody shared that common vision of what they do to execute the strategy. It was very, very laborious, but I got to tell you, at the end of the day, it facilitated execution in harmony. If you're not executing in harmony, you're not going to be performing at a superlative level. You won't be near a billion. The next thing, the fifth thing that I think was really important, I called cleanse the inside. Cleanse the inside in a way that reduces friction, that eliminates grunge, that eliminates bureaucracy, that kills dumb rules, it eradicates crap. All the things on the inside that gets in the way of people doing their jobs. Okay, and when stuff gets in the way of people doing their jobs, performance suffers, execution suffers. And so it was something that I personally as a leader spent so much time on. I mean, it was dirty stuff. And there's a lot of leaders don't like to get their hands dirty because it's hard and it's messy. And I guess the last thing I will mention, which should be obvious, is I am such a frontline champion. I am such a frontline advocate. And it was all predicated on my belief that in order to be truly effective as a executioner of strategy, you had to be close to the front line. You had to be attached to them. You had to live with them, embedded in their world. So good leaders, audacious leaders, are embedded with the front line.
Mazars is an international audit, tax and advisory firm committed to helping clients confidently build and grow their businesses. Move forward with Mazars. Visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.
There's a few things I want to pick through. One is you didn't mention competitors.
I would say you need to focus on your customers and observe what the competitors are doing. There's too many businesses that do things that their competitors are doing completely out of the scope what the context for the customer is. And when I said differentiate as the first one, that was all about being different than your competition, figuring out a way to provide what people craved and desired in a way that was unique relative to your competition. So yes, it's important. The way I come at it is completely different than the way most people come at it. I do not have a competitive watch. I have a customer watch, and we will drive deep to satisfy what people crave. And the result of that is I don't have to worry about the competition, Chris, because I've built up such a barrier to customer exit that it serves as a barrier to competitive entry.
We've spoken about this before, but with differentiation, it's not necessarily the product or service itself. It's the perception that customers have of you, which can be different to your competitors, and how you deliver that customer service. That can be the differentiation.
It's all of that. Okay, in fact, I've argued and written about the fact that in many cases, the product doesn't matter. And I'll tell you why. Most organizations in the same sector provide the same products at probably the same prices with the same benefits. And therefore, the question becomes, what makes any one of them different? What makes them different is the other stuff, the level of the customer experience. Do they have a say yes culture? Okay. Do they have long-term relationship building in mind, or do they flog products to fill annual quotas? Right? Do they have a service strategy? Do they get it right the first time relative to their core service? What kind of a brand do they have? They try and make it easy for people. It's emotionally driven values that really distinguish an organization. It's not the products and services. It just isn't. Now, you need the products and services. But I'll tell you what, Chris, they just have to work right every time. If they don't work right every time, it's a dissatisfier and people go away. But if they work every time, they may still go away because of the level of customer service that you provide, because of the level of dumb rules that you have in your organization. And so, one of the ahas for me very early on was get your core service right, i.e. your products and services need to work 24/7, 365. And then over top of that, you have this emotional level of capabilities, if you will, that's intended to dazzle customers with how they feel when they receive your core service.
You mentioned progress in inches.
You have to understand that there's no silver bullets. There's no Hail Marys here, okay? And when they do exist, consider yourself extremely lucky, because for most of us mortals, it's all about getting an inch worth of progress fast, getting 10 inches of positive traction because you've already overcome 8 inches of negative traction. Because don't forget, to be successful, you're going to fail a lot, okay? And what that does is means it's even harder for you to get a positive inch. And unless you have that mentality, you're going to be driven by short-term tactical gains. And unfortunately, there's no long-term in that. And so be happy, celebrate the inch of progress, because what you're doing is you're changing the culture of your organization. That doesn't happen overnight. So you're either in it for the long term or not. And you just have to make that call and be content with building a business that will yield the end game that you have in mind. And in our case, it was a machine that provided the only level data and internet capabilities in the markets where we served. And so we were relentless in that. We didn't have any, but I would say, technology breakthroughs that nobody else had. Everybody had the same IP technology. It wasn't about that. It was about other things, right? And I've often said, the product and service, they're not really that important. Just make sure they work. People expect them to work. They'll continue to do business with you if they work. But if you want to keep them for the long term, now you got to deal with their emotions, how they feel when you engage with them. When they do business with you, are you easy or deplorable? You have a choice.
That was entrepreneur Roy Osing. Business Essentials Daily is a SoundCartel podcast. Producers are Nick Schildberger, Chris Ashmore, Jeff Waters and myself. Technical production by Pete Letts. I'm Nicole Goodman. Thanks for listening. We'll bring you more Be Daily next week. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.